Let me take you back to a magical place where every day was an adventure, where your parents would force you out of the house to go roam the neighborhood by yourself with your friends. Do whatever it is you want to do as long as you're not breaking the law or get caught. Nobody could call you or text you. There was no cameras around to follow your every move. You were truly free. Let me take you back to this magical world before the internet. Let's jump right into it. The year is 1991. My buddies and I were cruising on our bikes, on our BMXs, just around the neighborhood trying to figure out what we're gonna do. You know how it was back in the day. You felt like rebels, like cowboys, you know? And you had your crew and you did whatever you wanted to do. Pop a wheelies, you go to the store, 7-Eleven, get some Slurpees, do random stuff at schoolyards, climb on the school roofs. It was a wild time where you were careless and free. And I remember me and my buddies, we pull up and we see these kids, they're in a back alley. And again, this is like 91. There's no X Games, there's none of this stuff happening right now. This is just me and my crew rolling through the neighborhood. And we see these kids building a bike ramp in the back alley. And we're thinking to ourselves, okay, this looks pretty cool. Then we see individual, each kid, you know, jumping off the ramp, catching air. And just being in awe of all these kids, just like one after the other, catching air, catching air, catching air. And then you just have to ask, hey man, is it okay if I use your ramp? And the kid's like, yeah man, go ahead, do it. So I remember, pull up the ramp and I get a real long head start. And I'm about to jump off the ramp. So I'm coming up to the ramp and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get air. I'm gonna pop a wheelie as soon as I get on top of the ramp, and I'm gonna catch the most air out of everybody. So that's exactly what I do. So I'm doing that. I hit the ramp, pop my wheelie, and I'm going, and I'm soaring through the air like a fucking eagle. And what happens? My front tire flies off my bike. So now there I am, flying up through the air like an eagle, no tire to land. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this isn't gonna end good. And there I do, and I come right down in the forks of my bike. I go ass over tea kettle, scrape out on the street. And I jump up as soon as I possibly can, scrapes all my arms and my knees, shoulders sore, jump up like nothing happened. Everybody's saying, oh my God, I think he's dead. He's dead. And then when I jump back up, everybody's like, oh. You could hear the screaming and yelling, whoa, that was cool. That was the awesomest thing I ever saw. You're hurting, but you're not showing anybody that you got any pain. And the first thought that comes to my mind is, what the hell am I gonna tell my dad about this bike, man? Not worried about your injuries, not worried about a concussion, not worried about your scrapes. How am I gonna explain this bike to my dad? Man, the world before the internet was something else. Because there's really, for me, there's two worlds. There's post-internet and there's pre-internet. In the pre-internet days, you were forced to go out and do things. You couldn't just stay home and be on the internet, be on your cell phone, be on your smartphone, be on your computer, be on your iPad, watch Netflix. Like, that wasn't happening. Plus, your parents wouldn't let you. Your parents would literally force you out of the house. I remember it would be the weekend, for example, 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Your parents would basically push you out of the house because they wanted some peace and quiet to themselves, and you would literally just go roam the neighborhood. You would meet up with your crew. I remember this like it was yesterday. I go over to my buddy's place, knock, knock, knock on the door. His dad would come. Hey, Mr. Panchuk, is Russell home? Russell! And he would call for it, and he'd come to the door, jump on his bike, and we would roam. We would roll, and we would just figure out what we were gonna do then. Or you might make a phone call to a friend. Remember the rotary phone? Trying to make a phone call to a buddy, and then their parents would pick up, or their mom would pick up. Hi, Mrs. Colton, is Chris home? Yeah, 1 second, Matthew. Chris! You know, there was no texting. There was no, and if their mom was on the phone or somebody else was on the phone, there was no way that you're going to be able to get through to them. So you just have to go over to their house. Can you imagine a world where you actually couldn't get a hold of somebody? That's the world we lived in. And it was a magical place. It was the best place in the world because you didn't have to worry about much. You just did whatever came to your mind. I remember when, for example, now in the world, I remember when you and your friends, you'd have conversations with each other, and you would have a question and you wouldn't know the answer to the question. Back in those days, you couldn't just go onto Google and search for the answer. You couldn't just go on to AI and search for the answer. You literally had no answer. You might ask your parent, you might ask some older kids, you might ask people you think know the answer, but there'd be times where you go days, months, and years with no answers to any of your questions. Which was amazing because you could always wonder. You're always in a state of wonder because you never knew the answer to so many things, which was great. So you would just make things up. You would just imagine the answer, which was wonderful. And I remember too, just the rumors that would float around about like celebrities. Remember, there's no internet. So there would be a rumor floating around about Marilyn Manson and he got his ribs removed so he could do something to himself. Like, we never knew the answer to that question. We couldn't just Google search it. Google did not exist. Imagine the world without Google. Well, we lived there. It was fantastic. You couldn't just check to see, okay, who scored the game-winning shot in the Pacers game versus the Bulls in 1987. That wasn't something you could search. So you're left in a state of wonder most of the time. And I think about some of the wonderful things that the kids don't get to do these days. For example, my dad, if he needed a pack of smokes, he would literally give me a note, a $10 bill, and I would head down to the convenience store, give the note, and the guy would give me the pack of smokes for my dad. This is how it was done. There was a lot more trust, and you think about it too. The parents nowadays, I hear a lot of, well, it's a different world now. It's a lot less safe for kids. So you can't just let them out and roam like you used to back in the day. So let me get this straight. For the entirety of history, when kids would just be let out of the house to roam, and they made it, people made it, no problem. You're trying to tell me that keeping them at home on the internet and not going out and getting to know people and see the world and experience the world, you're trying to tell me that's a better way to raise the kids? I think that the internet, and just because back in the day we couldn't just go on the internet and start typing in Google searches for naked women or Google searches for sex or anything like that. We literally did not have that. If anything, we would find like a magazine, like a Playboy or something, and then we'd show it to each other, and that was it. That's as far as it got. We never had this instant gratification, this instantaneous everything. You couldn't just listen to any music you wanted to listen to. You literally had tapes or you had CDs, and whatever you had, that's what you listened to. And what you would do is you would make mixtapes. So you would, if your friend had a certain tape or your friend had a certain CD, whatever the case may be, you would basically create tapes and listen to those tapes with all the different selections on there and create your own mixtape, which was, again, so fun because you actually had to go out, get the music, find the music, and then create it. You couldn't just search anything and have it. The world before the internet was a magical place. Look at this boat. You would literally, every single day was an adventure. Because you would go out, you have no idea what you were going to do. You had no idea where you were necessarily going to go. All you knew is you had enough for like a Slurpee or a super big gulp. You were going to at some point hit the store to get a Slurpee or get a super big gulp. And the rest of the day was up in the air. That's how it was. And I remember as well going with my dad or my brother, my sister, my family. We would go get a movie from this place that I remember. It was called Acme Video, which was like this old, massive warehouse. And when you pull up to this place, it was huge. It was bigger than any Blockbuster I remember. And on the side of the wall, you would see all these huge, like super-sized movie posters of all the movies that you love. Like I remember seeing Rocky from the cover of Rocky 3, where he's standing there with his title, or Schwarzenegger from Predator, or Commando, or you would see like The Exorcist. And you'd be like, whoa, what are these movies? Or you would see like a big picture of Bruce Lee. It was incredible. And you'd walk into the place and it was huge. Over here, I remember you'd walk in, they'd have this little area that was all the new releases. And then they had different sections all over this place. And I would always go to the Kung Fu section because I was a Kung Fu aficionado. All I wanted to do was watch Bruce Lee movies, Kung Fu movies every day, all day. And this is the 80s and the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, where I'm watching Bruce Lee. Like, I had no idea that Bruce Lee was dead when I was watching him. I thought he was alive and well. Like, I didn't even know. He didn't even seem like a human being. He seemed like a real superhero, but he was dead in like 1973, I think. And here I am watching his movies in the late 80s, early 90s, being absolutely mesmerized, having no idea that he was no longer alive. Crazy, man. And you would go through and you would, and it was just if you ever want to watch or get an idea of how it was back in those days, watch The Wonder Years. There's a TV series called The Wonder Years. Now, it's based in the 60s, but a lot of it was very similar to how we grew up. You know, I had a mom and a dad, well, for a while. Most people had a mom and a dad, grandparents, and most of the kids, like in the Wonder Years, would just roam the neighborhood with each other's friends and get into trouble. You know, you would have your crushes, you would meet a girl, and you have to understand, back in those days, you would have to meet a girl, you'd have to talk to her, you'd have to get to know her, you'd have to talk to her parents. So if you called the house to talk to a girl, you would literally have to call, and then their dad would answer, like, hey, Mr. Walsh, can I talk to Brenda? You know, like, you'd have to actually go through the father or go through the mother. The worst is when she had a scary dad, you know, just to talk to a girl. Imagine if you had to do that these days, talk to the dad and then talk to the girl. That's how we had to do it back in the day. But you know what? It helped. It made you grow a pair because you had to man up. You had to do it. Otherwise, it wasn't getting done. And you have to go over to the house, meet the parents, and then you might go to the store, you might go to a movie, and one of your parents would drive you. You're probably used to that as kids now. Or like, that's how it was. There was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was the telephone, and you had like this parent you had to get through. It was wild. I remember too, the one thing I used to love as a kid, I would love going out and I would search for bees. I was fascinated with bees and with insects and with nature in general, spiders. I would literally go out. I remember I'd be young, this would probably be like 84, 85, around there. And I would just roam yards looking with a jar, poke holes in the top of it, and try to catch bees on dandelions like this. You can see that? Dandelions everywhere. And if I caught a bee, I would put it in my jar and I would look at the bee. But it was, the world before the internet was an incredible place because you couldn't rely on Netflix. There was no such thing as Netflix and chill. You couldn't rely on all this external entertainment. You had to entertain yourself. So if you wanted to do something with your friends, for the most part, it was outside. It was just something you had to figure out. Don't get me wrong. As I got older, we started getting things like, obviously, like video games like Nintendo and Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64. So we would spend some of our time inside. Like, for example, after school, we would go to my buddy's place and we would play like Super Mario Kart. 3 or 4 of us would go, or we would play like Bomberman on Super Nintendo or on Nintendo 64. Like, we did that. Don't get me wrong, we did that as well. But most of the time we spent outside. We spent outside kind of just exploring. And if you wanted to find your friends in those days, you just had to know where they were going to be. You had to know the spots they hung out. You had to know what house, which person's parents would allow kids to be at the house. All that stuff, man. You had to know all that. And a lot of the times, the best way for you to find out who was in which house they were at, you would just look for the bikes in the front yard. That's how you could tell which house your friends were at, by just where the bikes were. And obviously, I remember, when I never got, so just a little bit of a thing here, I never got the internet or a cell phone until like 2004. No, I got the internet in 2001 when I moved to Toronto. I never got a cell phone until 2004. So I really do know the world before the internet and before the cell phone. Yes, I was alive, but when I was growing up, I never had internet in my house, and most of my friends never had the internet. Some of them did, so I would go over there and we'd play internet games or whatever we would do, but for the most part, nobody had it. So you would spend, especially for summer vacation, they called Generation X the latchkey generation, and which meaning because the parents would just have the kids go outside, and you would literally spend the entire day outside from morning till night, till lunch or till dinner, whatever, and you would come home when it got dark out, and that was normal. And the parents weren't out there worried about, wonder where Matt is today, wonder what person so-and-so is doing today. We just figured out what we were gonna do: go to the mall, or go to the park, or drive your bikes around, go jump on somebody, climb a fence and jump on somebody else's trampoline when they're gone on vacation. That's what we did, man. And the great thing about the pre-internet days is you actually had to use your imagination to figure out what you were going to do. And nowadays, all the kids, they have so much stuff where they don't even have to leave the house, And it's a shame, because a big part of being a kid and being able to go outside and experience the world is exactly what I'm saying there, is actually feeling the experience of not knowing, feeling the experience of wonder, feeling the experience of just doing whatever the hell you're going to do and not knowing where you're going to go and not knowing what's going to happen. And you didn't just copy everybody. You literally, if you made a joke, you might have heard it from somebody, but you basically were coming up with your own jokes, coming up with your own games. This is how it was. So when you think, and the other thing, so even for example too, as we're coming up, because we never had cell phones and because we never had the internet, we'd always be out so for example, our girlfriends would play soccer. So we'd always be at the soccer games, or we'd be at the softball games. They'd be at our volleyball games, or we'd be at their volleyball games. And it was a culture of going out and doing things. You always had to go out and do something, which is awesome, because when you went out and did something, you would meet people. And meeting people was cool. You meet people from other schools. You would meet people that, you never thought you would normally meet. Also, I remember, we all had, most of us had jobs as we were kids. So when I was 15 or 16, I started working at McDonald's. But most of my friends, we started working at 15 or 16 years old, just at regular jobs, just like McDonald's or at clothing store, or eventually I ended up working at the movie theater. And it was awesome, man. And you meet so many people by working. Nowadays, most kids, I don't know if they work as much as they used to. Back in the day, when you went into a McDonald's, pre-internet days, there was always teenagers working there. When you went to the movie theater, a lot of teenagers were working there. A&W, Taco Time, Taco Bell, whatever. Anywhere you went like that, it was teenagers that were almost always working there. Because kids always wanted to have a job. Or you go into the mall, working in the food court, you know, your friends would be working at these different places. I remember when I was working at McDonald's, I first started work. I was working in the back end to begin with. And then I started in the front end, and I was taking orders. And my friends knew that I was scared to make ice cream cones. So what happens, like 6 of them come in, and they come to my till, and they all order ice cream cones. So I had to sit there, and I had to frickin' make 6 ice cream cones for my friends, which was awesome that they did that. But it's an unfortunate situation because kids nowadays, unfortunately, I find that maybe, don't get me wrong, could our parents have been around a little bit more in Generation X and as a millennial, as an elder millennial? Probably. But I think it's kind of overcorrected itself nowadays because it seems like the parents have turned into bubble wrap, like they've bubble wrapped their children and they're scared to let their children experience the world. It seems like parents are a lot more scared these days than they were back in the day. And I'm not sure why that is, if it's because there's just so much more access to news and access to, because you can always check your phone, and every time you check your phone, you see a terrible story about a kid getting kidnapped, or you see a terrible story about something bad happening to a kid, and you just start to think that the world's a super dangerous place. And as a result of it, you basically bubble wrap your kids, you helicopter parent them and don't let them do anything. And I just think that that's unfortunate because kids need to be able to explore. Because when you're young, your mind, you're full of wonder, you know? And what's life without wonder? And I think that's kind of what's happened in this newest generation is the idea of wonder is kind of gone because basically anything you want, you can think, you can get AI to create, or anything you want to watch, or anything that you want to do, you don't have to do it, you can just watch it, you can find some place to watch it. And you have so many excuses just not to leave the house. It's like people don't want to leave the house. And when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was leave the house and explore. Because life was an adventure. But nowadays, people would rather be exploring the world of Warcraft or Minecraft or whatever. I don't even know what these kids are playing these days. But it's having a genuine effect on people's imaginations and their abilities to consider what kind of lives they want to live, what kind of lives they can live. So it would be nice if the kids could go back and, you know, not have cell phones, not have Facebook, not have the internet, not have Instagram, and go see what it was like to explore the world without having everybody being able to get in contact with them whenever they want to. Because that was truly a blessing. It was one of the most important experiences as a kid, is just that feeling of freedom, that feeling of wonder, that feeling of wandering, and that feeling of not knowing. I'm not sure what that is. But nowadays, when you see the kids, it seems like they're always with their parents, or they're always on their phones or iPads. Like I was at a restaurant the other day, and a whole family came in, mom, dad, I think they had 3 kids. Each kid brought their own personal iPads, and the entire time, and this one kid had big earphones on, and the entire time that this family had dinner together, the kids, they didn't talk to each other. The kids literally watched their iPads, they ordered their food, and they basically sat there in silence, not talking. This was a family this was what I saw recently, of a family out for dinner. And for me, before the internet, man, like when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, we never went out to eat, like very rarely. If we got to have McDonald's or something, that was an absolute treat. Like it was maybe once or twice max a year where we would get like McDonald's. I never tried Burger King till I was like 14 years old. Because my other buddy's dad, my friend's dad loved Whoppers. And the first Whopper I had was so fucking good. I will never forget that first Whopper. But it was a rarity to go out and actually, you know, try fast food. Like, it just never happened when I was a kid. Until I turned 15, 16, and I started getting my own money, then obviously, yeah, that changed. But you always dreamed about getting your license, you know? Like, as soon as I get my license, I'm gonna have more freedom, I can drive anywhere. But I'm not sure how many kids are like trying to get their license these days. Seems like kids don't even care to get their license. They just rather have their parents drive them around. Like, all I could think about was, and listen, I loved being a kid, but I also like wanted to have freedom, and I wanted to learn how to drive a car and do things for myself, you know? But the world before the internet, you had to be active. You had to be out there doing something. And the craziest thing about the world before the internet, I was never bored, very rarely. Because we were always doing something. Driving our bikes, climbing mountains, running through fields, catching mice, swimming. Just doing things all the time. I was never bored. Never had a cell phone, never had the internet, never had Netflix. Never. When I was a kid, very, very rarely would I get bored. Man, we always figured out something to do. Every day after school, this would be like probably grade 8, grade 9, grade 10. We would literally, in the summertime, we would literally go to Elport Park and play baseball. We call it the Elport Park Baseball League. And it would be guys, girls, anybody that wanted to come from our university, from our high school, was allowed to come, and everybody would come, and we would play baseball every day after school, and it was awesome. You know, I remember I hit a home run, and when I first came to the league, I remember my buddy Jesse Sakaris, his name was. He didn't think I was that good at baseball, so I'm like, oh, I'm really good. So my first at bat, what do? Smash a home run. And he's like, okay, I guess he is good. But it was like one of those things where you were just outside and hanging out. Like, you're always with people, you know, like in person. So you would be talking to people in person. You'd be talking to people's parents. So you got used to talking to adults in real life. You got used to talking to girls because you would only be, for the most part, you'd have to talk to them outside, like at school, or when you're out in the park, or you're just roaming the neighborhood, or on the phone, or you would hang out in big groups together, like go to like little birthday parties and dance, you know, where you would dance. I remember somebody would play a slow song and you just sit there and dance, and maybe you might get a kiss or something. It was very innocent, man, how we grew up. Honestly, for me anyways, as a millennial, like, we were all very, like, in my experience, we were very respectful. Like, getting a kiss was a big deal, you know? Like, it was the greatest thing in the world. Like, nowadays, kids have just advanced, and it's just like, seems like, I don't know, it just seems like it's much more X-rated these days. Like, whereas when we were kids, when I was younger, like, it was very respectful, because you had to, you know, there was no texting, there was none of that. So you just, you know, just how it was. I don't know, it was different. I just found that we never progressed in that world as fast as, say, this next generation does. But that's the thing, you know, always being active, always being out there, always doing things, experiencing things, hurting you know, falling down and breaking your arm. These are all things that happen. Winning and losing, these are things that happen. You got to learn what it feels like to have victory on the football field, or in baseball, or in hockey, sports, or dodgeball, or maybe a girl that you liked didn't like you back. That was reality. That's just how it was. And you just had to deal with it. You learned. You learned so much by just going out in the world. Maybe I'm nostalgic and romanticizing the life before the internet, but it was truly a magical place where you really were living, where you really were doing things, where you really were in search of wonder and wild and different things, where things that seem to mean like so much more. You appreciated music so much more because you didn't have it instantly. You appreciated movies so much more because you didn't have it instantly. You appreciated all that stuff that we have now. Everything that you can do on a smartphone, we had to go out and do physically. We wanted to watch a movie, we had to physically go out and basically rent a movie. If we wanted to listen to music, we had to go out, find the music, bring it back, tape it, or buy the tape, or buy the CD, and play it. Everything we did was physical. Now everything that people do is not physical. The opposite of physical, I guess. Is it mental? Where you don't do anything really. You can just literally get a phone or a smartphone. And that's it. Everything is meant to keep you at home and keep you away from people, from interacting, from being a part of a community. And I know that people think they're part of a community because they're on some sort of a website, or they're on, I'm not sure, what do you talk, who do you talk to? Whatever, on the internet, talking to people, maybe playing video games, talking to their friends playing video games. But that's just not the same thing as having friends in real life and meeting and talking with people in real life. So that's it, man. That's my talk on the magical world of the internet, of the world before the internet, I should say. It was a magical place where you had to use your imagination, and you just roamed, man. It was a great place. So let me, anybody that watched this, drop in the comments, what are some of the things that you did with your friends or by yourself in the world before the internet? You have any wild stories for me? Drop them in the comments section below. But this was a fun one, man. I really enjoy talking about what it was like prior to the internet. All right, I'm Matt Ross. I'm the Lone Wolf.